I guess I'll keep that. Okay, great. Okay. So preparing this talk, just move this over a little bit. Preparing this talk, I was thinking about why someone would come here. And the most obvious answer is that being a parent is hard, really hard. So if you feel like it's impossible to be a parent and a sane human being during a pandemic, you are not alone. And if you felt like it was impossible to be a parent and a sane human being before the pandemic, you're not alone. So my goal for the talk is to offer tools, to offer some practices, some ideas, all in the hopes of supporting you. Sometimes I say I'm not selling anything. It's all about seeing what fits for you. You know, give it a try it on, see if it fits, see what you like, and we'll go from there. My take on it, and the reason I love talking about this, talking about mindfulness for parents, is because mindfulness has helped me, quite frankly. I'm not naturally a calm person. I'm naturally quite a stressed person. I believe I could win some worrying awards. I don't know if anyone here would challenge me to those awards, but you'd have some stiff competition. So mindfulness hasn't made all of that go away. Mindfulness, I don't know what a perfect parent would be. Mindfulness has not made me that. It hasn't made all of my stress go away. What it has done, and the reason I like talking about it, is that it gives me some tools to deal with it. So I can be more present for my kid, for my daughter. So I can be less stressed, or at least less carried away by my stress. So my plan, I'll just lay out a little bit the plan for the talk. What I'm going to go over is how I define mindfulness first. And then applying it, mindfulness for parenting can mean a lot of different things. So I'm going to talk a little bit about self-care with some exercises that we can do, and then applying mindfulness to parenting, and then how we share it with our kids. And then I think around 8 o'clock, we'll move into some time for Q&A. So what is mindfulness? If you've been to any mindfulness talks before, if you've been to any WTM stuff before, you know everyone has sort of their own definition for it. There's so many definitions. Mine, or the one I like of late, is the idea that mindfulness shows us that there are two things happening in every moment. There's what's happening, and there's my relationship to what's happening. And most of the time, I do not have any say in the former. Right? Most of the time, I don't have a say in what's happening. We can't really control our kids, right? We can't really control ourselves. I can't control my own emotions or my own thoughts. You know, I can't really control, getting my kid to practice the guitar, getting her to bed, getting her to stop reading, right? There's so much that's out of our control. I can't control the weather or COVID or all of this stuff that's happening. Tons of stuff out of my control. What I can do and what I have some say in is how I respond to all of that. And that actually changes everything. And I like to focus on this particular definition because it's empowering, because so much of being a parent, so much of it is out of our control. Right? I mean, just think about your reaction when you found out that you were going to be homeschooling if your kid is of that age, right? There's so much that automatically happens. So mindfulness is giving us tools to train our minds, to train our brains to respond to what's happening the way we choose, with kindness, with curiosity, getting rid of or putting aside some of the judgment, rather than what most of us tend to do, what's a very human thing to do, which is just reacting on autopilot. So for parents, the basic approach to mindfulness is seeing what's happening in the present moment. So really seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, feeling, thinking, I think I got them all, what's happening, including all of those automatic reactions. So your kid drops a plate, right? What's your immediate reaction? Your system just reacts. Maybe the immediate thing you want to do is yell, or you get mad. And so with mindfulness gives me some tools to be able to see that reaction and then perhaps choose a more measured response. So mindfulness for parents is pausing. It's letting go when we can, and we can't always, but when we can, letting go of that habitual reaction, letting go of the autopilot. It's being with what's happening in the kindest way possible, and then choosing a kind, compassionate, deliberate way to respond. So what does that mean for parents? The topic can mean a lot of things. Like I said, it really means, I think, 3 things. It means mindfulness for parents, of focusing on self-care for parents, what we do as people, as parents. It can mean mindful parenting, tools to help in the act of parenting, right? So dealing with all the stuff that we deal with as parents. And then the third one is more mindfulness in the home, right? Ways to do mindfulness together, sharing it with the little people in our lives, the sometimes shorter, then grow very tall very quickly people in our lives. I want to spend most of my time talking about the first one, or at least a good portion of time talking about the first one. And we have lots of time for questions, so if I don't get to the other 2 enough, we can explore that a little bit later on. Why do I start with self-care? I start with self-care because it's the part that we need the most, and it's the part that we're most likely to ignore. Right, so you came here, and maybe you came here probably, or perhaps because you heard that mindfulness helps kids. And we all want to help our kids. So whether you're here as a parent, a guardian, a caregiver, you want to help your kids. It focuses on kids. And we put so much attention on them. We tend to put so much attention on them, and we lose, or it's so easy perhaps to lose sight of the fact that caregivers can't pour from an empty cup. If we don't care for ourselves, we don't have anything left to actually care for them. And you've probably had this experience multiple times, perhaps, right? Feeling too burnt out to listen, or too frazzled to respond calmly when they ask, the same question for the millionth time over, and you lose it and you yell, and then we need to care for ourselves. It's all human. But it's the difference again between sort of the reaction and the response. My reactions are those things that I've trained myself habitually to do, but I don't always want to do them. And so my response is, that's where this empowerment comes in. They get to be my choice. So I had this experience. I wrote this book, this positive parenting book. It's not a plug, it's an anecdote. So I'm writing this book, and I'm trying to look at how I am as a parent, how I relate to my kid, and how I interact, and so on and so forth. And I started to look at when I yelled. And this very humbling realization happened that I kind of already knew was there. But I realized that my yelling had infinitely more to do with me than it had to do with her. She's the same kid, right? The same amazing, delightful, confounding, frustrating, wonderful kid. The kid that has not stopped talking since she started. The kid that never stops moving unless she happens to be reading a book, and then she doesn't move at all. She wasn't changing. What changed was my stress level. The more stressed I got, the more I yelled. And when I was more balanced or more regulated or more like had my shit together, then the less I yelled. It's kind of obvious, but it's really humbling when you actually look at it. So to stop being a yelling rage monster and to better handle my stress, to be a better parent for her, and really a happier human being for myself, more present for my life, my partner, I really need to take care of myself. And so the first step for parents is, we talk about this all the time, but is mindfulness for yourself, is self-care, right? Taking care of ourselves. That's the first step for parents. It's the oxygen mask thing, right? If any of us had remember being on airplanes, they tell you, you put your own oxygen mask on first before helping other people. Right? Why do you do that? Because you cannot help anyone else if you don't have your own oxygen. If I'm not okay, or at least okay enough, then I can't actually support anyone else to be. I can't support my daughter to be okay. So taking care of yourself first isn't selfish. It's so hard to believe sometimes, right? We're told the other way so often, but it isn't selfish. Taking care of yourself and taking care of yourself first isn't selfish. It's actually a requirement. It's a necessary condition, right? We should do it for ourselves. But if for no other reason, if I don't take care of myself, I can't actually care for my daughter. If we don't take care of ourselves, we can't actually care for our kids. And one way to see this is that the nervous system is a collective one. Human nervous system, we're mammals, like other animals, we feed off of each other. So you can picture, right, a field of white-tailed, oh, that's hard to say, a field of white-tailed deer. And one hears a sound or senses something's wrong and its tail goes up, and immediately all of the other tails goes up too, right? Until the threat passes one way or another. Now, we might not have tails, but you know you've been in that situation, right? Where you go into a room and someone is frantic or frazzled, or their tails are up. And it's very, very hard not to get frantic or frazzled with them. Hard not to freak out with them. The human nervous system is a collective one. It's most obvious when they're babies, right? Maybe you have a baby in your house right now, or expecting one. Maybe you remember all the rocking and the shushing and the holding and the swaying, right? Talking softly. There's a lot of like bouncing. You never stop bouncing sort of for the first year. Touching them gently but firmly. Why do we do that? We do that to regulate their nervous systems. For the most part, babies cannot self-soothe. Right? When a baby is crying at the top of their lungs, and you know they can, they actually need us to shush and calm to regulate their nervous systems, because they can't really do it themselves. It's one of the loveliest things as you watch your kids grow up, to see them learning that self-soothing, the self-soothing techniques. And we kind of forget it as they get older, right? As they get older, they freak out, they have tantrums at varying ages, right? The tantrums don't stop, they just sort of change, they morph. But we kind of forget that, what they need is that self-soothing. They still need in some ways the shushing and the rocking, right? Just in a bit of a different way. Now when they are crying at the top of their lungs, or whatever that looks like now when they lose it, we so easily move into brain mode, right? Our thinking brain takes over because it has so much practice. Like, what's going on and how do I fix this, and what happened at school, and am I a bad parent, and why can other parents handle this and I can't, and right, this whole narrative dialogue. So the thinking brain tends to take over, but what we really need and what they really need is to regulate our nervous systems, to be present in our bodies in this moment. And most of the time, whether they're babies or whether they're teenagers, and even beyond, our kids co-regulate their nervous systems with ours. So we can support them to find balance when they've lost it, but only when our nervous systems are regulated. It kind of flips it on its head, right? When you think about like the kid who's slamming the door in your face and yelling at you and I hate you and all of those behaviors, is actually the kid that is 6 months old, wailing at the top of their lungs, can't self-soothe. Doesn't mean they're right, but the need is still there. So I remember The story, the story of my daughter breaking her arm. She had just started at a new school. It was September, like it was beginning first week of school. And I get the dreaded call from the school, and I'm frantic, and I'm, trying and throwing on like clothes and like different shoes or something. I don't think I had socks on. I can't remember. And I race to the school. School is very close by. And I'm racing to the school, and I'm so panicked and nervous. I don't really understand what happened. I get to the school, and I can hear her crying. Now, it's a very small school, but still, like, I can hear my child wailing. I get into the school, and I stop for a split second, right? Because I know that if I go in there panicked, right, if I go and rush to her and freak out, and oh my God, what happened? And this is so horrible, then her nervous system, which is already up here, is only going to go higher. She needs me to be down here. She needs me to be regulated, so she'll come down to my level of calm rather than me meeting her at the level of panic. Most of us do this semi-automatically. So I had the presence of mind to stop, just take a quick breath, and then walk calmly, very, very quickly, but calmly to her. And I'm able to tell her that everything's going to be okay. And then she comes down to this level, and she's still in pain, but the level of panic subsides somewhat. So when it comes to our kids, if we want their tails to be down, we can't come in with ours up. When our nervous systems are dysregulated, it's just so easy to pass that on to them. So again, that's key for us, because when they're yelling or having a meltdown, what they actually need from us is our calm presence. That's when they need love. There's someone who says that there's no such thing as attention-seeking behaviors, only connection-seeking behaviors. You can decide what you make of that, but you can't do that if your tail is up. So self-care doesn't mean that you always have to be calm or you get a million massages. Sorry. But it means that the first step in supporting your kid is taking care of yourself. It's taking a breath or two. It's checking your own nervous system before you help them. Unless, of course, there's immediate danger, and then you do what you need to do. So how do you actually do it? You've already done it. You've done it a million times before, right? Anytime you stop and taken a breath, anytime you said, I just need some space, anytime you went for a walk, anytime you paused before saying something you might later regret, then you've been self-regulating. So one of the things I want to focus on mindfulness for parents is, I'm not trying to add another regimen to your life, right? If I come in and say, well, now you should meditate for half an hour a day, no one's going to do that. You might try. I'm not saying you have good intentions, right? But it's just really hard, especially now. So one of the ways that we can self-regulate, that we can self-care, that we can turn this into a habit, is to look for little moments throughout the day. Little moments where you can pause, where you can check in with yourself, where you can notice, right? Seeing what's happening and seeing how you're relating to what's happening. So you can try it. Let's try it right now, right? You don't need to change posture. You don't need to do anything. You can just notice how you feel now, or you can even just sort of put yourself in the scenario of, right, learning that schools were going to be canceled and not knowing when they would, how long they would be online for, right? And then just take a moment and just feel your feet on the floor. You might take a deep breath or two, particularly focusing on your exhalation. If you can lengthen your exhalation, it's actually a signal to your nervous system to calm down. And just check in. So feeling your feet on the floor, feeling your breath in your body, letting go of judging, just feeling what it's like to breathe in and what it's like to breathe out, just like we did before. So that's self-regulation. That's self-care. And it takes once I talk too much, but it takes 1 second, maybe it takes 2 or 3 seconds. So it's not about being calm. It's not about being relaxed, and it's not always going to be pleasant, right? Just like parenting is not about being calm, at least not for me, right? And it's not always going to be pleasant, but it's how we respond to all of that. So our brains are brilliant, right? They let us solve problems, they let us pay taxes, make movies, watch movies, all of these things, but sometimes they get in the way. It's our minds that worry, our minds that dwell on the past, or figure out, freak out about the future, overanalyze. So the idea, one of the reasons I do that exercise or those suggestions is because you put your attention in your body. Your body is here, right? Your mind, I don't know where your mind is right now. Your mind could be anywhere, right? In the past, in the future, somewhere. Your body is here. So one way to practice as a mindful parent, to give ourselves that self-care and to be more present, is to connect with how our bodies feel right now. And to do that in a way that's kind and curious and non-judgmental. So there's another practice that I like to do. Sorry, I just need to see what's happening here. Okay, so this one, it's kind of I like it as an introduction to mindfulness. But if I ask you right now, don't worry about your posture, don't worry about where you are, what's happening, getting it right. Just see how many toes you can feel. You can close your eyes if you want. But just right now, not wiggling them, not picturing them or looking at them, though you can do all of that if you want. Just how many toes can you feel right now? And it might be 0, it might be 11. Just noticing how many toes you can actually feel. And if you want, you can type into the chat how many you could. I gave you, 10 seconds for it. Anyone willing to share how many toes you could feel? Two, perfect. I think I had 4, 2, about 4. Sometimes I know I have 0. Like I have no toes. You kind of have to look down and see if you have any. Right, 3, perfect. Anyone have 10? Sometimes it feels like more than 10. It's like, what has happened to me? Something is wrong. I don't know what's up right now. Oh, what did I do? No toes. Yeah, which is fine too, right? So the idea though, in that moment, your attention was in the present moment. Your attention was here. And it doesn't actually matter. It doesn't matter. You don't get more gold stars if you have 10 toes, if you feel 10 toes, and fewer gold stars if you get 0. The point is not the outcome, right? The point is, in that moment, you're being interested, curious, non-judgmental about what's happening right now. And you bring your attention here. So one of the keys of self-regulation, one of the little practices that you can do, is to just every once in a while check in with how many toes you have, how many toes you can actually feel. And practicing this stuff is like practicing any other skill. The more you do it, the better you get at it, the easier and the more habitual it becomes. It is a practice, right? We call it the practice of mindfulness or the practice of meditation for a reason. So the more familiar you get with your own nervous system, your own body, your own emotions, your own reactions, then the more comfortable we get when unpleasant situations arise, because we know that they're there. It's not like they punch us in the gut or this huge shock. So again, it's not sitting in meditation for an hour or like, great, now I have this other thing on my to-do list. It's just moment to moment, and all of those moments add up. I'm checking out the time and realizing I have so many things to say and not very much time to say it. So I'm going to run through a few things. How to make this a habit, how to make self-care a habit. I really believe that it's these small moments that are repeated many, many times. Let me just check in on this. It's being in the present moment without judging it, which my shorthand for this is to stop shoulding all over yourself. Right? I should be this, I should be that, I should be bigger, I should be smaller, I should be smarter, I should be more patient, I should be a better parent. All of these things, all of them take us out of the present moment. So there's this act in some ways of befriending our brains. It's like, oh, my brain has this pattern that I didn't even know I had. Do I want to keep doing that? So we know that our brains get good at what they practice. The technical term for it is experience-dependent neuroplasticity. But it's this idea that, you know, you learn to ride your bike and then you get good at riding your bike, and then eventually riding your bike becomes automatic. It's the same thing with stopping and taking a breath. It's the same thing where, you know, you get in this rut where you yell at your kid every time something X happens, right? Now, we can train our brains. This is the beautiful thing about neuroplasticity, is you can train your brain. Your brain does get good at what it practices. And we know that our brains naturally see the negative more than the positive. So like, if you can remember all of the bad things that happened, or all the negative memories, or all the times you screwed up with your kid more than the good stuff, that's not your fault. It's not you. It's actually, your brain's actually wired that way. It's a feature, not a bug, believe it or not. It's meant to keep us safe. It's meant to help us survive. So one of the other things that we can do to make self-care a habit, to become a more mindful person and a mindful parent, is we know that the more we focus on the good moments, right? What feels nice, the connection with our kids, the more our brains will learn to pay attention to those. They get better at those over time. This idea of neuroplasticity. So the book Sticky Brains is all about that. It's the idea that bad thoughts are sticky, but we can make good thoughts stick too. So one of the important things we can do as parents is just that, is to focus on the joy, the little moments. And they might be very little moments. It might be just really enjoying the sip of coffee in the morning. Or, you know, how cute the kids look when they finally go to sleep. But if we can soak in those moments, that's another thing we can do for both mindfulness, presence, and also for self-care. And the last one for now, the last piece is to hold ourselves with compassion. To hold ourselves the way we'd hold our children. Right? When your kids are in pain, when they're in need, when they're really struggling, you know, we don't tell them to shut up. What's wrong with you? Why are you doing this? You should be better. We tell that to ourselves, right? We're so mean to ourselves. We speak more cruelly to ourselves than we would to anyone else. So when you need it, and when you're struggling, and when things are rough, and when you're in, you know, bloody pandemic, and it's snowing at the end of May, just holding yourself the way you would hold your baby, or when they were babies. Speaking of not controlling things, there's lots of yelling going on in the background. Apparently we're out of the soap. So I said that there were 3 topics, and I thought I'd have a lot more time to talk about the other 2. I'm just going to kind of run through a little bit of the stuff on the parenting, and then maybe we can, in the Q&A stuff, we'll get into some of the other things. So mindfulness and parenting, or mindfulness for parenting, or parenting as a verb, or however you want to talk about it. How do I do this with my kid, around my kid? How do I be a more mindful parent connected to my child? One of the suggestions that I have is to practice being present for them. And it doesn't mean that you have to want to listen to them sing, Baby Shark or Justin Bieber or whoever. I can't keep up with all the things, right, for the 800th time. But it's that being present for them. So giving them your full attention. So one of the habits that I've tried is to tell my daughter, right, I'm writing an email right now. I want to give this my full attention. I have to give work my full attention, and then I can give you my full attention. I don't want to do half either way. So I actually say that. And you can say, depending on the age of your kids and the circumstances, right now, I just need a break. I want to play with you, but I'm really stressed or I'm really frazzled. I'm just going to give myself 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, right? So then I'm not just giving her, my daughter, we're not giving our kids, we get to give them our full attention, and then we get to give our jobs our full attention too. We can start to notice how much distracted parenting that we tend to do. Other ways that we can use this or connect with our kids. There's so much. One of which is just modeling it for them. So this connects to this third topic, which is, how do I share it with my kids? You can't force mindfulness. Forced mindfulness isn't mindfulness. It has to be something that they want to do, that's an invitation that they're excited to do. And the best way to do that is to model it for them. They'll probably get curious. They might not, but they'll notice something in you. Like, Mom, you didn't yell. What's going on? Are you okay? Right? So modeling it for them, you can say, right, I'm getting upset right now. I'm just going to stop and take a breath. One practice that's really lovely to do both with your kids and for your kids is naming your emotions. There's this phrase, Dan Siegel, a pretty well-known mindfulness neuroscience guy, he coined "name it to tame it." And we actually know that we can calm our emotions. We can regulate our emotions, self-regulate, self-care, just by naming them. It actually brings sort of the left brain, the more linear thinking brain, kind of back online a little bit. So by naming, I name an emotion. Right now, I'm feeling X. And then that both models it for them. It gives them a tool, right? Oh, this is what people do when they get upset. And it also gives you another moment of self-care. Maybe the last thing I'll say, because I'm looking at where we are with time before Q&A. No one has all the answers. I certainly don't. There are no such thing as perfect parents. They're only perfect moments. And I think the idea of mindfulness for me is about being able to tap into more of those moments. And I miss a lot of them, and I lose a lot of them, and I get caught up in a lot of them. But if I can take care of myself, if I can be more present for my family, for myself, my husband, my daughter, then I can capture more of those moments. And then I get more say in how, really how I'm living my life, rather than how it sometimes feels like my life is maybe living me. And then the last thing I'll say before Q&A is just, you're doing great. Whatever you're doing, however it feels, however on or off it feels, however good or bad it feels, you're doing great. And just being here and just making the effort, it matters, and it makes a difference. So I thank you. I thank everybody. And breathing. I get nervous, I forget to breathe. So I think we move into some Q&A now, and I'm happy to address some of the things that I promised I would talk about, and then kind of rushed my way through for lack of timing.
Nicole, that was just delightful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And every pearl, every every word, every sentence, and especially from your heart was just so nourishing. My kids are adults now, and certainly I was having memories of my rougher parenting moments in the past. And even still, even though your kids do grow up, just that presence and just really trying to connect with the heart as a parent, your heart to their heart. And it's just so important. Um, as a psychiatrist, I'm very much aware and talk to people all the time about self-care. And just to highlight a couple of the things you said along the way, that an empty cup has nothing to give. And people often think that, self-care is indulgent or dismissive or arrogant or I don't have time or whatever. But your analogy about the oxygen mask on the plane. And I'm just curious, Nicole, as I remind folks, please, no question is unworthy. Every question is worthy. And I promise you that if you type in a question, that there are 5 other people who will go, oh yeah, I was also thinking that. So Nicole, my question, what's your sort of sense about why people may hesitate to give themselves self-care? What gets in the way that we believe martyrdom is somehow, martyrdoms of virtue in our culture, perfectionism, push. Any thoughts on
It
that?
is.
What gets in the way and how to respond to that in a mindful lens?
I think we are, one of the messages that we get is you're supposed to be busy. So someone asks, how you're doing, what are you up to these days? Oh, I'm so busy. There's so much going on. And there's, in some ways, it's celebrated. And we don't generally have downtime. Our downtime is still full. It's still playing on our phones, watching Netflix, doing all these things. And it's not that those things are necessarily bad, but we don't, generally speaking, we don't focus on just doing nothing. Right. Even when I'm going for a walk, it's like I'm wearing my, the Fitbit or something, like Apple Watch, and how many calories and how many steps and all that stuff. So I think in some ways we're programmed to be doers, and we don't place sort of the same premium on just resting, just letting go. There's a guilt, I think, that comes in, and especially as parents, because there's so much to do, right? I can always make more dinner or do more laundry, or there's so much. And I don't think it's focused on enough in our society. This is one of my sort of pushes with education, is that I think we need to bring this in really early on. So like kindergarten, elementary school, getting everyone, practicing stopping and taking a breath. And the more normal we make that, then it just becomes, this is what we do. This is what we do as a society. This is what we do as a people. So for parents, it's something that you want to incorporate with your kids. It's something we try to do in my house. We try to, stop and take a breath before we eat dinner. Stop and take a very quick breath, because we're always running late before we, leave the door, get out the door in the morning to go to school or work or whatever that looks like now. So I think it's a shift in priority. I think it's coming slowly. I see it in my university classes, where I do mindfulness with all of my classes. And the first week or the first few weeks, I'm just this weird person. What is she doing? Why are we doing this? And everyone tells me these things. And then they sort of see, oh, it's actually nice. It's kind of nice to stop a little bit.
Yeah. Sounds as if there's an element of reminding ourselves to give ourselves permission.
Yeah, I think so. I think permission for self-care. I think permission for time that isn't filled. But I do think that it's one of those things that the more you do it, the better you get at it. So it can become a habit. We just need to make it conscious. And the more, more we talk about stuff like this, then the more, maybe perhaps the more conscious that it can be. Oh, there's lots of good stuff happening in the chat.
Yes, there is. I'm going to read you a question. Yeah.
Okay.
Just so we've got it. We have a question, first question. How do you let go of judging when you're both a judge and what is being judged in the same moment?
It's not going to happen automatically, and it may never quite happen. To be very, blatant about it, I think what the practice of mindfulness is doing is it's making more of what is generally unconscious or subconscious, however you want to put that, making it conscious. So making ourselves aware of some of these habits, because you can't change what you don't know about, right? If I don't know that I have a particular habit, I can't do anything about it. Then it has all this control over me and I don't even know that it's there. So in the example, this isn't particularly judging someone else. The example that I like to use is just paying attention to how many times a day do you call yourself an idiot? Or something to that effect, right? How many times do I say, you're so stupid? What an idiot, something like that. If you start to pay attention to that, and that is very humbling. You see, my brain gets good at what it practices. There's this thing I'm practicing. I didn't even know I was practicing it. How many times a day do I practice it? Do I want to be practicing it? And then we start to make all of that conscious, and then you can start to make some of those choices. So then to go back to the question of judging, if I see that that's what's happening, then in the moment I can give myself, maybe I get a microsecond of space in between the judging and the reaction to be able to decide, yes, I want to follow that thought or not follow that thought. And then the last thing I'll say on that is, we don't choose most of our thoughts. The numbers vary, right? And Alan, I'm sure you know this better than I do, but it's something like we have 50 to 100,000 thoughts a day, right? So whatever the number, it doesn't actually matter what the number is. But if you think about that, you have, let's say, 50,000 thoughts a day. Now think about how many did you choose? Right? How many of those thoughts were actually conscious, were actually your choice? Many of our judgmental thoughts, they just come in, they're just automatic. So it's not that I necessarily have to get rid of all of my thoughts, or all of a sudden I have to be this saint-like person that never thinks anything bad. But I can decide which thoughts I want to believe. I can decide which thoughts to give more weight to. So the way I often teach it is the idea that our thoughts aren't our fault, but they are our responsibility. And so those judgments come in, right? Judgments, like, we're going to judge our kids. We're going to judge our partners. We judge everything. It's what we do. I don't have to beat myself up for being human. And if I can see it, then I can start to choose what I do about it. And it's a practice. Like, think about how long it took me to get really good at being mean to myself. So how long do I need to, how long can I have the opportunity to work on finding more kindness?
If I heard you right, and I can try and link back to where you started this evening, if we're in the moment, that's the only moment I'm here. I'm not in the past or the future. And it's in that moment that you're suggesting we bring our attention, and we can become aware of the autopilot, and then I can choose my responses appropriately, or more wisely, or more kindly, and connect with my kid, which actually leads on to another question directly, which is, how can you calm down your teenager when they're having a tantrum and yelling? Or we say negative things to our kids. I'm kind of combining two questions here, like, why can't you do this? What's wrong with you? And how can you stop yourself from saying these things that you go, I blew that moment?
Yeah. Okay. So the first one, when our nervous systems are activated, and you can, like, you see this most, it's easiest to see with toddlers, right? Because toddlers throw the greatest tantrums. Now, I don't have a toddler anymore, so I can call it great. The most epic tantrums. They don't, their rational, it's like their rational brain is offline. They actually can't hear you. So you can say, calm down, you can say, what's wrong with you, you can say all of these things, right? They actually cannot process. They can't, the rational brain is not online. They cannot process what you're saying in that moment, right? If you've ever had to try to have a rational conversation with someone who's freaking out, you know this. And the more rational you try to be, and the less they can hear it, and then you get pissed off because it's like, why aren't you listening to me? So the teen is in that, basically that same place. And there's all sorts of talk, and I did all sorts of research for the positive parenting book about what's happening with teenage brains. Teenage brains are far more limbic system than they are prefrontal cortex, which basically just means the part of the brain that makes decisions, executive function, makes proper decisions, empathy, fear modulation, risk taking, all of that is not properly developed in teens. Now, anyone with a teenager, you don't need to know the brain science to know that, right? Our brains actually don't finish developing until we're 25. So when your teen is freaking out, she is entirely limbic system. She's basically one big emotional nerve. And so you can't rationalize with her. And again, you know this. So what can you do? First thing is to check in with your own nervous system, right? Can I, as long as she's safe, she, he, they're safe, can I handle this right now? And if you can't, you need to take a break. Even if it's just that 1 second break, can I feel my toes on the ground? Can I take a breath in my body? Because if you're yelling back at her, you're just like, it's building on top of each other. You're only going to heighten her nervous system. She's only going to heighten yours. And then, right, the shouting match goes on forever. So give them a chance to feel the emotions. This is one of the things that we tend to do, is we have this sense that emotions are bad, and so we're not supposed to feel them. And so one of the things that you can do to support your teen is actually just let her yell. And it's not pleasant. I know it's not pleasant, but like, she'll get it out of her system. There's a lovely discussion. The book is called My Stroke of Insight. It's also a TED Talk. And it's a woman, she's a neuroscientist, and she goes through her own stroke. And she knows what's happening because she's a stroke scientist. And she describes knowing what's happening to herself as she's going through the stroke. Anyway, she talks about this idea that emotions, the physiological response of an emotion lasts for 90 seconds in our bodies. 90 seconds. That's it. That was insane to me the first time I heard it, because like, when was the last time I was mad for only 90 seconds? So where I'm going with this is letting the emotion be, letting her be upset. And then when she's ready, right? And I'm not saying, she's yelling for 24 hours, but when she's ready, then you get to just be that calming presence. It's okay. I'm here for you. I'm ready when you want to talk. And you might be raging inside, but if you rage at her, she rages at you. And again, you have that sort of building on top of each other. So I would say your first job is to connect to your own nervous system. And then when your nervous system is regulated, you can help her regulate hers by listening and not arguing and not trying to rationalize and not trying to solve it, whatever it is. Right? Let the emotion run its course. And then when she's regulated, when you're both calm, and it might be that day, it might be the next day, or whenever, then you can go back. I really want to talk to you about that thing, that whatever that was. And then so to connect to the next question, that we all say negative things to our kids, right? We all say things we regret to our kids, to anyone. And you're probably not going to stop, because we're human and we make mistakes. And so one of the most important things that we can do is both forgive ourselves and forgive them, and apologize. Right. So one of the things we say, and I like to repeat, it's a mantra of sorts in our house, is you make a mistake. When I make a mistake, I make amends. I forgive myself. I learn a lesson and I move on. So we can do that with our kids too, right? I made a mistake, and we can tell them, then we're modeling humanity for them. They get to see that adults make mistakes and own up to their mistakes, right? I'm sorry, I made a mistake. That's the sort of after the fact. Sorry, back to the question. So how do you prevent yourself? It's just a matter of, again, it goes back to this idea that is so simple but not easy. If I can see what's happening in the present moment, if I can see that I'm starting to lose it and starting to get upset and starting to think all those judgy things, then I know I need to take a break, right? Before I'm going to say that thing, I'm just going to go for a walk, or I'm just going to remove myself. You can even say that I'm feeling really angry right now. Naming those emotions is a really, really helpful tool. I'm feeling very angry right now. Then anger isn't this thing that has you. It's sort of this thing that's visiting you. It doesn't own you. And if I can see that I'm angry, if I can name it, then I've got some sort of wherewithal to be able to decide what happens next. So it's not that you won't do it, because you will. But the more I can be aware of what I'm feeling in any given moment, the more I can have some say in how to respond. So the last thing I'll say on that is, don't you love it when you lose your train of thought? We practice. One of the loveliest things is you practice when everything is boring. Practice when things are fine. So I practice taking a breath when I'm not super really stressed. So when I am super stressed, I have some tools to fall back on. Right? That's actually meditation. The practice of meditation isn't about being good at meditation. Because really, who cares if you're good at meditation, right? I've said it before, there's no meditation Olympics. I mean, yet. There's a yoga Olympics, so who knows? But you don't meditate to be good at meditation. You meditate, it's like a laboratory. I meditate in a controlled environment, right? I make it dark. I have a nice chair or something like that in a comfortable position, so that when life hits me, when my kid slams the door in my face, whatever it happens to be, then I've got these tools to fall back on. So that's where these little moments sprinkled throughout your day can really make a difference. So that's where I can know what where I am with my emotions. Oh, you're so welcome. If I know where I am with my emotions, then they're not going to get the best of me as much.
Yeah. I'm sneaking up again, Nicole. We've got, and it's almost a follow-on from the one of that self-regulation in the moment, helping your child self-regulate, giving them the room, owning the emotions, removing yourself for a timeout, which isn't a punishment, it's a practice of self-regulation. And then the next question is almost a follow-on. How do I get my kids to stop ruminating on negative thoughts that they see online?
Oh, yeah. Boy. Yeah. The timeout thing. Timeouts, I think I take timeouts in our house. Timeouts aren't a thing for my kid. They're a thing for me because I need them. And that's to go back to the question of, when you start to think something judgmental, it's like, I need a timeout right now. And I actually say it out loud, but we're a little bit strange in our household. How do you get your children to stop thinking of negative thoughts? So, it's such a lovely question. It's such a heartfelt question and such a hard thing to deal with. So this kind of goes back to this idea that the negative is easier to see than the positive. So they're not actually doing anything wrong. And there's something very, very empowering in hearing that. It's not you, it's not your fault. Your brain isn't broken. Your brain isn't broken if you see the negative more than the positive, if you remember it more, if your brain looks for it more. Our brains actually all do that. So on the one hand, I think there's normalizing that a little bit. I mean, there's all the conversation. It's like it's an hour-long conversation, right? Because there's all this sort of discussion about how we deal with material online. Can I ask, Pina, can I ask it, if you, do you mind typing, and you don't have to, but do you mind typing specifically what are you talking about, like with respect to the news, with respect to COVID, with social media and bodies, in that, something in that area?
Yeah, I'll just say it quickly. So yeah, they'll read something online, something about someone like they respect, like a mentor, someone, you know, like a professional football player, let's say, for example. And then they read negative stuff about them because they have them on a pedestal, and then they get all upset and, you know, tantrum, and, you know, are so disappointed that, oh, and I always tell them, oh, this is just online. It doesn't mean it's true, but, you know, they still do that big tantrum and start, can't believe it, you know. And
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so first thing is my disclaimer that I'm not a psychologist. So I want to answer, I'm going to answer the question, but I want to just be clear that this comes from my position as, you know, someone who works with kids and who works with parenting, but is not an expert necessarily in this area. So the things that come to my mind first and foremost are, I mean, it's certainly hard when someone's on a pedestal, but there's actually something really lovely about everyone being human. So I don't know, you know, the specific scenario that you're exploring, or like who it is and what happened, but in some instances, there's something really freeing when we see that one of our heroes also makes mistakes. And so part of me would think that maybe there's a bit of an approach in that. And then the other things is sort of related to what Alan's talking about, is we can make a distinction. We can really see, let them feel hurt, right? So I do want to make a distinction as much as I can between the feeling and the thought. So thoughts tend to run. If the emotions last for 90 seconds, it's the thoughts that make them last for minutes, days, hours, decades, right? So one tactic would be to have them know that the feeling is okay. The validating the emotion, right? It's okay to feel upset. It's okay to feel hurt. Let yourself feel hurt. It doesn't feel pleasant. It's not necessarily nice, but sometimes we overprotect them, right? We want to shelter them from all of their feelings, and really what needs to happen is the emotion needs to be felt. And so it's okay to be hurt. I'm so sorry you're hurt. I know how hurt you are. I know how frustrated you are, and it's okay to feel that way. And that doesn't make it go away, but it gives them the freedom for the emotions to be validated. It lets them feel those feelings. That's a start to answer that question. There's certainly a lot more there, and I'm not going to pretend that, you know, I offered a comprehensive answer, but it gives maybe some tools to kind of explore it a little bit.
Yeah, I can add on a thought or two there, just in terms of, there's so many angles in the question there about thinking. Yeah. So we can point out to kids, as Nicole has, the rumination, that it's the thought, it's the thinking about the feeling that keeps it going. And then what happens is we spiral because we believe our thoughts, and then we use those thoughts to justify the feelings. And then the stronger the feelings get, they sort of ossify and concretize the thoughts. Hearing negative things about a hero online, for example, it's also a good opportunity to teach kids, as Nicole said, that nobody's perfect, that we need to use discretion. We need to use our own judgment of that person. Maybe we know them or not. We need to recognize that there's often multiple truths going on. that no one is perfect, that everyone has these all sorts of issues. There's no one who's perfect. So it's a great opportunity to talk about good and bad people, the virtues, what kind of things we do aspire to. There are heroes who do awful things, and they're very famous people who are in jail, and they're famous people on trial at the moment, and all kinds of stuff. So I think it opens up another whole conversation with your child about really finding out what they're feeling and what are they thinking and what's upsetting. Is it that somebody's disagreeing with their opinion? Is it the fact that they thought their idol is perfect? So I think it's a real opportunity to really explore and have a rich conversation. And whichever way your child takes that conversation is fine. But just the mindful meeting them in the moment, where are they at? Rather than trying to solve it or fix their feelings or take sides on whether or not you think this person's good or not. And I just throw in a couple of other thoughts. And Nicole, a bit of a change in tack as I scroll up again. There was a question that I bypassed, and I don't want to leave it out. Somebody was asking about mindful teacher
The program.
training programming. Yeah. Have you got some comments or to point people in that direction?
To be perfectly honest, I'm not working with that organization anymore, but the organization is called Mindful Schools, and you can check it out. And I know there's some people who are trying to put some certification programs together in Canada. So if you send me an email, I love talking about mindfulness in education and training teachers and talking to educators. So my email is nicole@followyourbreath.com. So if you want to send me, Yvonne, if you want to send me an email, we can talk about that further. And I just wanted to go on off of what Alan said, off of what I said. I think as a general approach, when we're with, helping our kids, supporting our kids, being with our kids, this sense of checking my nervous system first, helping them self-regulate, validating the emotions, right? All emotions are valid. Not all actions, but all emotions are valid, right? Letting go of the problem solving, letting go of that analytical brain until you're both ready, until you're both in that space where you can both hear it, and you'll know when they're not, right? It's just like when you're with, if you have a partner or you've got a best friend and you have a fight and like they're ready to talk and you're not ready to talk, you can't hear them. So you wait until your nervous system is a little bit more calmed down, and then you can actually be present for them. So I think with our kids, it's harder because they push every one of our buttons we didn't know we had, right? And they know how to push them because we care so much and we love them so much. And so for some of it, it's seeing that this little human is doing his or her or their best, just like you are doing your best, and trying not to take it personally. Right? When they slam the door, when, they go through these periods where they don't like you or they like your partner more than they like you, that if I can see that it's just them and they're growing up, their nervous systems, and the other piece of that is just to call everything a phase, right? We do this when they're babies again, teething, growing pains, whatever. Call everything a phase. The stuff you're going through, it's a phase. Because if it's a phase, then I can get through it and there's an end to it. Otherwise, our brains go, it's going to last forever. This is forever and ever.
And nothing lasts forever. Absolutely.
No.
I have another tip. It worked well when I was raising our kids at a younger age. It still applies now. When your kid is saying something and you're feeling very emotional, and no matter what age they are, the instinct is to respond and want to fix it quickly and rescue and solve. In fact, there are 3 postures you can adopt. The first is shut up and listen. The second is you may want to offer some ideas, but not give them your opinion or necessarily tell them what you want to do. And the third one is hear what I would do in these circumstances. And if you don't know which one to do, just ask your child after you've both co-regulated and brought yourselves down. So shut up and listen, offer some ideas and let them decide, which opens the conversation. Or say, do you want? Because you run the risk if you just leap in If you shut up and listen without responding when they're wanting you to respond, you're not meeting them where they're at. The other way, if they're just wanting to vent and you leaping in there and fixing it, you're also mismatched. So if you don't know what you're doing, just ask your kid. They'll tell you. They'll tell you. Nicole, in the absence of any other questions and wanting to respect everybody's time as well, I want to again just thank you so much for a wonderful, heartfelt review of probably the toughest job that any adult has is being a parent, because we care so much, we love so much, we want our kids to be healthy and well. We want them to learn kindness and compassion and forgiveness. We want to be teaching them how to care for themselves. The best way that we can do that is by looking after ourselves. So truly, thank you for all the useful information and the tips and the reframing and all the ideas. It was just wonderful.
It's my pleasure.
Talk, thank you, thank you. This talk was recorded, as mentioned. We'll be posting it on the website, thebreathproject.org, in about a week's time. Nicole will probably be sharing her notes, or at least some summary. I invite you to go to the Wellness Through Mindfulness website. There's lots and lots of information. We meet every 2 weeks on a Thursday night. And on behalf of WTM and all the participants this evening, thank you wonderfully for all your questions, for your conversation, and thanking again the Calgary Public Library and the privilege of working with you in this collaboration. People have got